Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at the world of fashion, but not just like the latest trends or anything.
Right.
It's more about how fashion itself is kind of a powerful form of storytelling.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're really lucky to be joined by the work of Dr. Joseph Hancock, an expert in fashion branding and its cultural impact.
I think that's a really good point to start off with, like, how clothes can communicate so much, right?
Yeah.
Like, they can tell us about someone's identity or values,
Uh-huh.
maybe even, like, start arguments between people with totally different styles.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that really drew me to Dr. Hancock's research.
Mm.
You see, he doesn't just focus on fashion from like the designer's perspective.
Oh, interesting.
He actually blends his academic background with real-world experience.
Okay.
He worked at the Gap and Target,
Wow.
like leadership positions at big retailers.
Yeah.
So he brings that to his understanding of how fashion choices affect us every day.
That's a pretty cool combination.
Yeah.
Like, I bet working in retail gives him a whole different way of seeing how brands use clothes to tell stories and then connect with shoppers.
Right, and then those stories, they can influence everything from our personal style to like huge trends that sweep across like whole countries or even the world.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And here's something that really blew my mind.
Okay.
He has a book called Cargo Pants: The Transnational Rise of the Garment That Started a Fashion War.
Whoa, hold on, fashion war.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Well, it wasn't like a literal war, haha.
Okay, good.
But Dr. Hancock's argument is that cargo pants became like a symbol of this deeper conflict between like practicality and rebellion on the one hand, and then traditional ideas of style and like status on the other.
So it wasn't just about the pants themselves, but what they meant to people.
You got it.
Mm.
On one side, you had streetwear and hip-hop culture emerging with like a way more relaxed way of dressing.
Right.
And cargo pants with all their pockets and stuff totally fit that image. They were seen as practical, comfortable, and even a way to rebel against like stuffy old clothing rules.
Okay, so who was on the other side of this so-called war?
Picture like high fashion people in tailored suits, the kind of folks who look down on anything too casual or, like what they might call lowbrow.
Ah,
To them, cargo pants were like a threat to all the established fashion norms they held dear.
that's wild. It's amazing how something you wear can become such a big deal and spark such strong feelings from different people.
Exactly, and it shows how fashion is connected to social dynamics and power in ways that we don't always think about.
It's definitely more than just looking good.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things Dr. Hancock is trying to show us through his work.
Okay.
He's highlighting how what we choose to wear reflects deeper cultural values and can even become like battlegrounds for social change.
Interesting.
But it's not all about big picture trends. He's also really interested in how fashion plays out in each of our lives,
Yeah.
shaping our identities and how we interact with the world around us.
And that's where his work on mass fashion and lifestyle merchandising comes in?
Exactly. That's the stuff where he digs deep into how everyday people like you and me use fashion to express ourselves
Okay.
and navigate social environments. He says that every time we get dressed, we're engaging in these everyday practices, choosing clothes that reflect our identities, aspirations, and even anxieties.
That's a cool way to put it.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like we're curators of our own personal fashion museums, right?
I love that.
Me too. We're telling stories about who we are and who we want to be through the clothes we pick out.
And Dr. Hancock is like the guide helping us understand the exhibits.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's like a fashion interpreter.
Ah,
He
right.
helps us to like decode the messages behind our choices even when we don't realize we're sending them.
So like with the fashion war you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
someone who chooses cargo pants isn't just making a fashion statement. They might be saying something about comfort or rebellion,
For sure.
or even showing that they belong to a certain group.
Exactly. And someone who chooses a more formal style might be trying to project an image of professionalism or tradition or even like high social status.
I see.
Dr. Hancock's work is all about encouraging us to think about the stories we tell through our own clothes
Makes sense.
and to recognize how powerful those stories can be.
I wonder what other fashion choices have become like those battlegrounds for cultural values or ways to express identity.
That's a great question, and it's something Dr. Hancock explores in detail.
Mm.
And to dive into a specific example from his work that I found really fascinating, let's talk about his research on the evolution of crop tops.
Crop tops.
Yeah, crop tops. especially for men.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It might seem like a random topic, but it really shows how Dr. Hancock connects these seemingly simple fashion choices to much bigger cultural narratives.
I'm all ears. Tell me about these crop tops. All right, so crop tops, huh? What's the story there?
Well, first of all, you might be surprised to know that men wearing crop tops actually goes way back. Yeah, like Dr. Hancock traces it all the way back to like practical stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Like college football players, they used to crop their jerseys.
Why would they do that?
Well, it was to keep their opponents from grabbing them,
Mm-mm.
during a game.
Ah, that makes sense.
So it started with function over fashion.
Right.
Exactly. But then, like a lot of things in fashion, it morphed into a style thing.
Yeah, okay.
Bodybuilders started wearing crop tops, too.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed that.
It was to get around rules against having bare chests at the gym, but it also let them show off their muscles.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So then how did crop tops go from gyms and football fields to like regular people wearing them?
Dr. Hancock talks about the disco era.
Mm.
That's when crop tops got big in gay communities in New York and San Francisco.
Okay.
It became a way to express yourself and like a symbol of freedom.
Makes sense.
And from there, it kind of crossed over into mainstream culture.
Interesting. So who was wearing them?
Oh, think like Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh,
Or Mark Wahlberg in those Calvin Klein ads.
I remember those. I didn't realize that was a thing back then.
Yeah, for a while, crop tops were even seen as like super masculine.
Huh. That's a wild journey for a piece of clothing. From football to the gym to like everyone wearing it. But then didn't they sort of disappear for a bit?
They did, and this is where Dr. Hancock's take on it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He thinks that decline happened around the same time as the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s.
Hmm.
There was a lot of fear and stigma around the LGBTQ plus community back then, and anything seen as part of gay culture faced backlash.
So men might have avoided crop tops because they were afraid of being stereotyped or discriminated against.
Right. It really shows how these like anxieties can influence our fashion choices.
Yeah, that's a powerful example.
It also shows how fashion can be used to enforce social norms, but also to challenge them.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, crop tops came back in style.
Exactly. And that comeback says a lot about how our culture is changing, I think.
How so?
Well, celebrities like Harry Styles and Lil Nas X, they've been wearing crop tops.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures.
It's like they're pushing back against these old ideas of what it means to be masculine and opening up space for people to express themselves in different ways through fashion.
It's cool to see how fashion is always changing, right?
Yeah,
It reflects what's happening in society and also responds to it.
definitely. And what Dr. Hancock does by analyzing this trend is show us that fashion is more than just looks.
Right.
It's about our identities,
Right.
our anxieties, our hopes, and it can even be a way to make a statement about the world.
It's like every piece of clothing has a secret story hidden in it.
I like
Like
it.
a narrative woven into the fabric, and Dr. Hancock is encouraging us to figure out what those stories are.
Yeah, to be more aware of what we're communicating through our clothes and what messages we're picking up from other people's clothes.
It's like learning a whole new language.
I think that's a really important takeaway from his work, that awareness of the power of fashion.
Yeah.
It's not just about looking good. It's about what those looks, say the stories they tell, and how they affect how we see ourselves and how we see each other.
It all goes back to Dr. Hancock's main focus, which is how fashion branding is really about storytelling at its core.
Right.
It's about creating those narratives that people connect with and then building identities that people want to be a part of.
And shaping culture through what we wear.
Exactly. It's brands using clothes and the stories behind them to get their message across.
And we become part of that story.
Right. We decide which stories we want to wear, which messages we want to share with the world, and how we want to express ourselves using fashion.
It reminds us that we're not just buying clothes, we're actively taking part in this huge cultural conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, on that note, I think it's about time to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree. It's been an awesome look into the world of fashion branding and storytelling, and I'm ready for the conclusion.
Okay, so we've spent this deep dive really digging into Dr. Joseph Hancock's work and how fashion is like this secret language, this form of storytelling that goes way beyond just looking good.
Yeah, it's been pretty eye-opening.
It has, for me too. We've covered a lot of ground, from cargo pants being this battleground of style to the whole evolution of crop tops and how they became a symbol of so many things.
Right, exactly.
And all of it shows how the choices we make about clothes can reflect big cultural values, challenge norms, and become these powerful statements about who we are.
Yeah, definitely. So looking back at everything we've talked about, what stands out to you as like the most important thing Dr. Hancock is trying to tell us?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's how he emphasizes that fashion is a part of our daily lives. Like it's woven into everything we do.
Right.
It's not just about designers and models on runways. It's about how each of us uses clothes to express ourselves, figure out how to navigate social situations, and basically tell our own stories to the world.
I totally agree. That's a huge part of it. And what I really appreciate is that Dr. Hancock encourages us to actually think about those stories,
Yeah.
both the ones we're telling through our own style and the ones that brands are trying to tell us.
Exactly. We're all taking part in this constant conversation through fashion, whether we realize it or not.
Right. It's like this unspoken language we all use.
And understanding the rules of that language, knowing what messages are being sent and received, that's super important.
It is, for sure.
Think about it like this. Every time you get dressed, you're making choices that reflect your personality,
Uh,
your mood, what you're hoping to achieve that day.
mhm.
And all those choices, even the little ones, they add to this bigger fashion narrative that's always evolving and changing.
Yeah, that's a cool way to think about it. It's like we're all contributing to this giant story.
Right. And brands are really aware of that they're always crafting narratives around their clothes, trying to tap into what we're worried about.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think Dr. Hancock's work gives us tools to figure out what those brand narratives really mean,
Okay.
Like to see past the marketing hype and get to the core message. Are they trying to be inclusive? Are they reinforcing bad stereotypes? Are they appealing to our desire for comfort or to fit in or to stand out?
Yeah, it's like being a detective.
It is. And asking those questions helps us to be smarter shoppers.
Right.
We can choose brands that match up with our values and avoid the ones that are promoting harmful ideas or unrealistic expectations.
It's about taking charge of our own fashion choices, not just following the crowd.
Absolutely. And recognizing that we have power as individuals to shape the world of fashion.
Every time we buy something, every outfit we put together, it's like casting a vote for the kind of fashion we want to see more of.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a little challenge.
Okay. I like challenges.
Next time you're getting dressed, take a minute to think about the story you're telling with your clothes. What message are you sending out? What are your values? And how does your personal style fit into the bigger picture of fashion?
I love that challenge. It's a great way to keep thinking about everything we've talked about.
And hopefully it will encourage our listeners to keep exploring this fascinating world of fashion branding and storytelling.
It's definitely a world worth exploring.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this journey to the heart of fashion.
Thanks for having me.
And remember, it's so much more than just clothes. It's this powerful language we all speak, even if we don't realize it.